Welcome to the Jones Zone, a podcast by Darryl and JJ Jones.
All right, this is a great topic for this episode of the Jones Zone. We've got squatters. Those of you that have not subscribed yet, please click on that subscribe button. It'll help get this video out to more and more people. Lando Thomas works for the Squatter Squad. Tell us what you do. Tell us what squatters are.
Sure thing. I started this business a couple of years ago. I ended up running into a lot of squatting issues with the previous business, and that was removing RVs. So I would go to the property, or someone would say, hey, there's a RV on our vacant property. I'd go there, there'd be squatters inside, or vice versa. People would go on vacation, come home, and squatters would be in their RV. And so I found myself having to battle them because homeowners didn't know what to do. Now, I didn't think about it until these recent years, but the police won't help. So they're trying to figure it out. So they called me, hey, can you just drag this RV off the property? Oh, and by the way, there's people in it, or something crazy. So
for the one person that doesn't know what a squatter is, tell us what a squatter is.
Yeah, a squatter is someone who occupies a property, a dwelling, piece of land without permission. And what they're trying to do, and we can talk about the laws and why it's so easy for them, is they try to mimic a legitimate tenant. And so basically a squatter is someone that they're unlawfully staying on the property. We can talk about the line between squatting and a tenant, squatting and trespassing, but a lot of work we do is under trespassing laws. Someone that invades a property that has no lawful reason to be there.
You're about to pull a trailer off a property, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, a lot of situations. And some of these older videos are on our social media where I'm out in Palm Springs battling people on this property. I think it was next to a Costco out there. And the poor property owners were getting fines from the junk out there. What happens is these, I call them RV squatters, they'll go on vacant land and then other people will follow. They'll leave junk vehicles there that they're picking apart to sell parts or whatever situation. So once there's one RV there, here comes more and other problems. The property owner is always left having to pay the fines, left with the issues. So it was from that work that I realized, I thought, you know what, this seems to be really bad. Maybe I should start a business that helps property owners remove squatters, and then I had the idea.
How does squatting differ from trespassing?
So someone will come onto a property and they will trespass, let's say. It's a vacant home and the property owner checks on it every few weeks or every few months. And so what happens is the trespasser, aiming to be actually a squatter, they will do things, as I mentioned earlier, to mimic a tenant and try to gain tenant protection. So what they'll do is have mail sent to the property, right to the mailbox. They'll have utilities turned on. They'll get usually a cable bill under their name, move the electric bill into their name. The electric bill might be under the property owner's name, but they'll move it to their name. And so they'll have a fake lease. And so by the time the property owner notices them and calls the police, the squatter said, hey, I live here. I paid a deposit. Here's my lease. Here's my utility bills for 3 months, for 3 years. Some people don't look at their property for years. The key point here is the police officer cannot be judge and jury. It's basically he said, she said. So imagine you're a police officer and that person is saying that they lawfully live there. The homeowner is disputing it. What if the homeowner has a legitimate tenant and wants to just try to kick him out for trespassing or for being a squatter, so to speak? The cop would lose his or her job. So what that squatter is doing is making this very blurred line of tenancy and squatting / trespassing. And that's when the police officer says, you know what, this is a civil matter. Unfortunately happened, and this is more so in LA County. I can literally show the LAPD proof or have a witness that the people broke in 3 days ago, kicked the door in, moved in, and the cops will still say, oh, it's a civil matter. So we've got really bad problems, not just in California, but in Texas, all over the United States. There's only a few states that have put better protections in for the property owner, but a lot of states are the same as California. Even though you wouldn't believe it, their laws are just as blurry or weak as ours are.
Well, you mentioned LA County. I'm having an eviction attorney on this show here next week. And
Okay.
he was funny. I was talking to him. He's just outstanding for Orange County. I'm in Orange County, California. He said, okay, yeah, I'll do it, and et cetera. He says, but I don't want to talk about LA County. I said, why? He says, LA County is crazy. He says, they don't even know what the laws are there. He was so frustrated. This guy has been in the business for decades in terms of evicting people.
We do effective work in LA. We have a lot of successful squatter removal cases. We've had to sometimes embarrass them out, push law enforcement. If it's areas where there's sheriffs as opposed to regular police officers, it can be a little easier to get them out. But LA is a tough county to work in.
And it's tough because tell us about tenants' rights. I'm guessing those are the reasons why it's so tough.
Tenant rights, and I don't know all about tenant law. I don't want to act like I'm a tenant law attorney, but there's certain rights that legitimately protect the tenant from bad landlords. Some of these laws blend over. Again, having a lease, showing utility bills. Let's say a landlord had a verbal agreement with someone and there's no proof of it, but it was a legitimate verbal agreement, and that landlord ends up not liking that tenant. They might make up a whole story that they're a squatter or what. I'm just kind of making up a scenario here, but really we need to take steps back and go back to some of these laws and say, listen, this person is a clear trespasser. The property owner is willing to make these statements, and there's work we do in this area where we can prove that the property owner doesn't have an agreement, that those people are trespassers under Penal Code 602. It's a trespassing law in California. The officers are supposed to do their job and remove the trespasser, but they'll waiver on that. But we've gotten out a lot of squatters by just showing the trespasser arrest authorization form, signing a private person's arrest, or it's called a citizen's arrest. And the cop will say, okay, we've got the trespasser arrest form. You're signing that you're going to take responsibility of the arrest. If I break their finger, they sue you, not me. And so we have to do things. We do many things. I'm telling you a couple of basics, but we have to really fight on behalf of the property owner to prove that they are trespasser.
And not to state the obvious, but the longer they're in there, it sounds as though it's going to be the harder
Oh,
time
definitely, definitely. I mean, I got one out the day before this past Thanksgiving, and he had been there for many months. I did get the officers, with the help of my business partner, who's really good on the legal and loophole side of things. When we presented our case to the officers and I showed them why they need to arrest this guy, they agreed to it, and it worked good. We had him out in 15 minutes, and it worked great. But if that client didn't find us and hire us, they would have been in eviction court for probably over a year and lost all the money it takes to go through the eviction process, plus all of that months of lost rent. And it was a senior citizen woman, and that's the income she needs to live on. And so it really turned out well. So we have a lot of good success stories like that.
I had a client once who had an elderly father, and he actually had a person move in who he thought was kind of like a nurse, like just to watch him. He was in elderly 80s, and just to watch it, make sure. And then when he actually passed, and they had a really heck of a time getting her out because they didn't have a lease agreement, which was counterintuitive. I mean, that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, and sometimes not having a lease agreement can be helpful. There are situations, I mean, there's so many situations, and not to get into the whole eviction side of things, but this is something you can bring up with your next guest. For us, we do have to resort to filing an eviction. We have an eviction partner that does that, and it is so much easier to get someone out without an agreement. It's just easier. There's times in our cases where it may be handed over to our eviction guy, but let's say letting a friend stay over, like, yeah, you could stay a few weeks and that friend turns into a squatting nightmare. Well, when you go to evict someone like that without a lease agreement, much easier than if they had one. And so anyhow, that's just an example of, we've worked on cases where a friend became a squatter and we were still able to be effective with the situation because they were never meant to be a tenant.
How do squatters manipulate the legal system to be able to stay longer?
I hate to make some of this information public, but we need to let people also know what to look out for. And so one thing is, when we get a squatting situation, the first thing I ask, are there any children involved? Or, because it could be a flat out breaking and entering situation, and the minute there's kids involved, there's a husband, wife, and kids and dogs, whatever, the cops are like, I'm out. And so what they'll, but as far as manipulating, when it comes to, we've talked about the fake lease agreement, fake, we just had one recently where it was a fake paper receipt of a cash deposit, totally bogus, got that guy out. Back to the kid situation, it's a lot easier for people to manipulate the cops with kids or a handicapped person and the judge. So you gotta go to court. Let's say the judge sees children, they see a handicapped person, and we've had squatters in court that have fake injuries. I mean, they'll manipulate it with anything to mimic a tenant, the utility bills, the receipts, wanting the officers or the judge to feel sorry for them. And so,
what are some of the basic things that you guys do to get squatters out? You mentioned calling law enforcement, but I'm sure there's other things, and sometimes law enforcement doesn't do it.
yeah. One thing we do that I think if someone, and I'm not putting down attorneys or paralegals, but one thing Squatter Squad does is a lot of heavy research on who's in there, so to speak. And so we find ways that we're like, okay, the cops may or may not help us. Let's say they won't help us, then we can go this way, or this way because we've figured out who's in there and maybe what their weak points are. Oh, you're the brother of someone famous. Well, let me get CBS Evening News out here. There's many things that we do. Some of them are very creative, but it's all based on, like I said, who's in there. And that's why I think with hiring a service like ours, a homeowner can go straight to an eviction. That's going to take a while and cost whatever it costs. But many times it's worth rolling the dice with us, and we only will take on a case if we feel like we've got a really good shot at it, because we don't want to waste their money, our time. But just know that, it really matters who's in there, how long they've been there, and that gives us our direction. But, we have so many different methods. A lot of it's leaning on law enforcement, improving our case, and sometimes they're supportive, sometimes they aren't.
Well, I'd mentioning, I think before we started, I just took a lease listing. I was telling me I was going to have you on the show. She was talking to me about some 7-Eleven in San Francisco, which had homeless people around, which is unfortunate, of course. And they were playing some sort of classical music to get them to spread out and leave a certain area. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, on that note, and that's been going on, that's actually been kind of a thing for years, although you may have just, let's say, heard about it. But there was a 7-Eleven in Orange County where I used to live, 10 years ago, that was doing that. But a guy just invented a chirp box. It was on the news yesterday. It's a blue chirp box that apartment buildings and places where these homeless people go down below, you go to the bathroom, sleep at night, let's say in front of the carport, like where the carport areas are in front of your vehicle, as an example, and it chirps and has flashing lights. And so people are coming up with creative ways in that area. Now, that's not an area we deal with. It's, we might remove someone that is so-called unhoused or, homeless, and we actually will help them get back on their feet and try to find housing for them so that this problem doesn't continue. So part of the problem is these people just don't have anywhere to go. That's created an issue through the years, I think more so recently.
So how long does it typically take? So if someone, and I guess this will vary a lot depending on the facts of the case, but do you have a typical time frame that it would take? If I called you today, got someone that squatted my house.
1 to 3 weeks. We've had cases that dragged on for months, huge encampments in Compton area where we had to get a special team with the sheriff's department, and it took a lot of organizing. There was human trafficking, a lot going on in this commercial property that these people took over and started renting RVs to people or housing them, and it was a big mess. That took about 4 months. The property owner hired us because she had just had them evicted legally, spent months and tens of $1,000s evicting them. They came back the next day. So the cops were like, well, Don't know what to tell you.
When you say evicting them, because I recently had a client have to evict someone, and you're talking about sheriffs coming out, pulling the people out, well, maybe not literally pulling them out, but possibly pulling them out. So, I mean, this is like a formal thing. And then they have, I guess, the audacity to actually come back the next day and go back in.
Yeah, it happens. I hate to say it, but it does happen. And we've had cases where they evicted them. They came back the next day or the next few days, and the sheriff says to the property owner, which is legitimate, hey, you didn't secure it. You didn't do this, this, and this. We're not coming back out. So in this situation, huge encampment, and it was a tall walled commercial property, probably I would say a half an acre, quarter to half an acre large. The sheriffs came and got them out after this poor woman spent all this money getting them evicted. They came back literally the next day, and the sheriffs wouldn't help. So we came in and did things our way, but we hired 24/7 security for several days after that. They kept trying to come back in, but we said, nope, not on our watch. So when people hire us, we're not just getting the squatters off the property, but we're also securing it and showing them what they need to do so it doesn't happen again. Because if it does happen again, the cops are not going to just say, oh, you know what, you just evicted them yesterday. We'll come back every day when they come back. Nope, they're not going to do that.
So homeowners don't necessarily need an attorney. I mean, they can go directly to you when they have this situation.
Yeah, we're not a law firm. We're not attorneys. We do work with an attorney, but when it comes to lawful tenant situation, I'd say attorney would be a good thing. But when you're dealing with trespassing and trespassing laws and how we work, we can represent the property owner. We're not giving legal advice. We're just basically saying, you know what, instead of you doing certain things that you don't even know how to do, and you going to the police station, talking to the watch commander, going to the property with the sheriffs or the police officers, doing a door knock, doing this, and this. That doesn't need an attorney. We're just not in that realm where we're guiding them legally. In situations where something could end up in court, our eviction partner has an attorney and it's dealt with. But for what Squatter Squad does, there's just no need for an attorney. There's many times where we say, you know what, you might want to get an attorney and talk to them about that. You're proposing to do this, and this, which we see that to be, let's say, turning off the utilities on the squatters.
Yeah.
We consider that unlawful, but you know what? You better go talk to an attorney. So there's times where we tell them, you know what? I advise talking to an attorney. So that might come up as just advising them, recommending they talk to an attorney, because we don't want to get in any situation of a legal problem that we're trying to give legal advice. So we stay far away from that.
So basically just defining whether or not it's a tenant or a squatter. That's a big deal. Tenant, maybe trying an attorney. And it's funny you mentioned the utilities, because I think that's a obvious thing that a lot of people think, hey, I'm just going to have the utilities turned off. And that's actually illegal, correct?
It is. It is. And I believe, like, let's say in Los Angeles, it's a $600 a day fine potential if someone turns the utilities off. I've had situations where someone will call me and I'll tell them, hey, we can help you. I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to go there, throw all for things out. This guy in Moreno Valley got his friend to be a fake tenant to move in, which cops are onto the whole, out squat the squatter situation. And I said, well, you know what? Be careful, because you could get arrested. And guess what happened? They got arrested because they took her belongings, locked her out, put her belongings out in the street while she was working, and they got in big trouble. And I already kind of had a feeling that was going to happen, but you can't take the law into your own hands. And we've had situations where I've seen property owners get arrested because they think, oh, I'll just lock them out, or I'll just shut off the utilities, or I'll do this and this. Well, how many property owners have I seen that have gotten a restraining order because of harassing the squatter or the trespasser? Imagine there was a case out of state where squatters, a guy let them stay in the garage. They wouldn't leave. They got a restraining order against the property owner. The property owner wasn't allowed on his own property. Now the squatters had full domain of the whole property. So we need to make sure property owners know that they really should not take the law into their own hands. And that's where we can guide them like, whoa, you know what? I would not recommend turning off the utilities. If you think you're going to do that, well, I would talk to an attorney or read up on the law. When we're working with a client, we're always trying to keep them out of trouble and keep their property intact. So even when we're dealing with the squatters, we want to get them out in a way where they're not causing $40,000 worth of property damage on the way out. So we're always number one aiming to protect the client, including their property, and that's what we always have to think about when we're talking to them, is keeping them out of trouble, keeping their property secure.
It almost sounds like there's professional squatters out there. Is that fair to say?
Oh, there's tons of professional squatters. Some squatters that we remove have been evicted, 5 to 10 times. And I will tell you, it's not on the list here, but we uncovered a big Zillow scam. What happens is squatters will go on platforms like Zillow, and we had one woman that had 70 or 60 some odd properties under her name. She had many evictions under her name, and she would just rent them out, get a deposit, get 500 a month, and they would be these people so-called squatting. She'd get them into the unit. So easy to qualify with. And I don't want to bad talk Zillow. I'm just saying it's easy for people to qualify to get housing. And so there was a point where we were getting a couple Zillow calls a week of just, hey, the deposit bounced back. All these people there, the neighbors are complaining they're coming and going at all hours of the night. They won't answer my calls. It's a nightmare. In your world, I highly advise trying to educate people when they're renting their properties. They have to be very careful, because the driver's license of that person and all that background, which is a lot of it's fake, is not always the person moving in. And that's something to really pay attention to, not just Zillow, but any type of rental situation. So these professional squatters that you're asking me about, there's a lot of them, and some of them are a big crime ring with a kingpin, the ringleader, and that ringleader has all these properties and they're making money every month. Because imagine if I can get a property that might cost me 3,000 a month in rent, but I'm paying the ringleader 1,100 a month, and the ringleader says, you know what, I can keep you there at least 6 months to a year, because you're never gonna it's going to take a year to get evicted in Los Angeles. So just pay me the cheap rent for the next year. And the ringleader is making money on all these units. And so we've uncovered a lot of that. And we have some social media posts about it, and we've gotten them out. Just beware that that's a big scam right now.
Well, I know that I've had a lot of people that have called me. Craigslist is another place that at least I've seen where there's false listings, I guess you can call it. So you're telling me that there might even be. Are there even some people who are gosh, I don't know if this is even a term, but a legal squatter, meaning they thought they leased the place from the seller or the owner, I should say, and then they're there, and then all of a sudden, no, they're not there. That wasn't the owner.
Yeah, and that does happen, and it's a tragic situation, because picture a single mom, couple kids. She might have saved a whole year to get that deposit, the first month's in deposit, and they see this pretty good deal on Craigslist. They meet the person. The person's name matches. They even looked up the property owner's name. Yeah, it matches, although she didn't check the person's ID. She just said, "Oh, Tom Smith, oh yeah, hey Tom Smith, nice to meet you." Tom Smith has the keys because Tom Smith broke in and changed the locks and got her, so she moves all in, gets all of her furniture in, and then a week or two or a month later, however long later, let's say it's for rent, and the rental agency or the property owner goes by every few days or so. Well, they see a car in the driveway and someone's there, and et cetera, et cetera. And this woman answers the door, and they say, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" "What do you mean, what am I doing in here? I leased this place." So you have this innocent bystander squatter, that kind of an unknown squatter, and now they're left with having to be homeless, and all of their money went to this criminal. And there was a big ring going on in Atlanta, Georgia, and they calculated there's at least 1,200 of what we're talking about right now, about 1,200 of those going on.
You that have not subscribed yet, please click on that subscribe button. It'll help get this video out to more and more people.